Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are really glad to have you here for this rapid response session on new federal funding opportunities for educator apprenticeships, for the workforce development, and apprenticeship pathways. Right now, there's a real window of opportunity. We're seeing significant federal investments coming out of both the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Labor, as I mentioned, that are directly tied to the workforce development, educator prep, and also apprenticeship pathways. But what we're seeing across states and districts is that it's not always clear what exactly is available and how these funding streams work, or where to even start. So today we are cutting through that and really outlining just the facts, focus on what's released, what it's meant, how it's to work for you, and of course, how you can start positioning now to access these funds and align with federal priorities. We'll walk through some key opportunities like the State Apprenticeship Expansion Formula funding, emergency pay for performance models, and broader priorities as well, including AI literacy and CTE. And to lead us through all of that, I'm excited to introduce Erin Moe. Erin is the CEO of Innovate EDU and a national leader in the education and workforce systems change space. Through her leadership and the Pathways Alliance, she's been working along states, districts, and partners across the country to build and scale educator pathways. She brings to this call a very clear lens on that. And Erin, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Sabrina. And I really appreciate all the work that you and the 80 some partners of the Pathways Alliance are doing to really drive this work forward across states, districts, and communities. And welcome to everyone who's joining us online right now, live or in the recording. We know that there will be folks who are watching this or maybe listening to this as they're walking the dog or picking up kids from school or doing any of the million things we're all trying to get done in our day. So to those of you who aren't listening live, thanks for signing up and thanks for getting the recording. We're going to be sharing the slides and links in a follow-up email. So no need to feel like you have to take pictures of the screen with your phone or control alt print screen. No need to do that. And we will hopefully have some time at the end for Q&A in the chat that Sabrina is going to moderate. We'll do our best to answer your questions, but we might have to refer you over to our colleagues at the U.S. Department of Education or the U.S. Department of Labor or their QA systems. And so right now, let's jump in to the content and get moving. So it's really important to name two big pieces of I'm going to say sort of like market shifts, headwinds, tailwinds that are guiding federal priorities and then therefore are guiding funding priorities in this space. So in career and technical education in April 2025, the White House released an executive order preparing Americans for high-paying skilled jobs of the future. And if you really dig into that executive order, there's a lot of directionality around how the U.S. Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Commerce, and the U.S. Department of Labor need to work together. It set out the foundational work that guided the release of America's Talent Strategy. This is a document that gives you a 30,000-foot overview of how those three departments are going to work together. And that report, we really recommend you diving into it if you want to get to understand this administration's priorities here across career and technical education, workforce priorities broadly, but how this applies to registered apprenticeships and in particular educator apprenticeship programming and talent streams. And the goal set forth in this executive order, as well as in America's Talent Strategy, and I believe we also have a webinar on America's Talent Strategy if you want to go back through our archive on YouTube, was really 1 million new active apprentices across all workforce categories in the United States. The other significant tailwind, headwind, whatever you want to call it, is AI policy. And this really centers around opportunities for AI literacy. Among those, sort of pushes were the National Policy Framework for Artificial Intelligence in 2026, just released in March, really 4 priorities, but also that followed an executive order that was issued in December 11th, 2025, really focused on AI literacy. Between that executive order and that March framework from the White House came the Department of Labor's AI literacy framework. It's also important to mention the guidance letter in August of 2025 from the US Department of Education, which clarified existing titles could be used for educator preparation, AI literacy activities, as well as educator and paraprofessional training around AI literacy. But that work really spurred the Department of Labor to be thinking deeply about how to embed AI literacy in workforce preparation pathways, reskilling, retraining, pre-apprenticeships, really all the way through that pipeline. So context matters. These are 2 things to be paying attention to. Next slide. All the streams. So I'm going to go through real quick. I'm going to dig into some of these, but really here's an expansive list of available streams right now to support pre-preparation, preparation, and reskilling and retraining of the educator workforce. And when I use the term educator workforce, I am not just talking about teachers. I am talking about our paraprofessionals, our librarians, our tutors, the broad definition of educator preparation. So we're going to dig into this one. I'm not going to spend too much time. The SEED program open now. We'll talk in depth about this. But if you haven't already looked at this and you're in this space, this is a June deadline. Be paying attention. It's about $90 million to expand and develop teacher preparation programs explicitly, including apprenticeships. State Apprenticeship Expansion Formula grants. These are also open right now. These are through states. We'll talk about eligible entities, but this is a program to really support both existing apprenticeships and then innovative apprenticeships under which education falls, given that the national guideline standards for K-12 teacher apprenticeships are only 3 years old. So we're still innovative, even though they've been deployed in 50 states. Workforce Pell, this is an on the horizon. We're going to talk about this stream, how to be thinking about and preparing strategically for Workforce Pell that will open in July of 2026. Next slide. ABA grants. So these are not yet out, but we do expect some ABA grants to be released in pretty short order. These are Apprenticeship Building America grants. Many educator preparation intermediaries and programs have received ABA grants. So be ready for those. WIOA funds. So again, these are just sort of knowing how to use these dollars. There was just a WIOA hearing on the Hill, a new plan around modernizing WIOA. I don't have a crystal ball around what Congress is going to do, but it's important to be paying attention to that one. Clarification, again, that you can be using IDEA and Perkins funds by state and local education agencies to support specific streams of educator apprenticeships. We know many people are addressing special education teacher shortages through special education apprenticeships. Our friends at the Cedar Center are doing some incredible work there. And so just be paying attention to how to use those funds. And then newly available, and I just want to call this one out, is Veterans Readiness and Employment. So these are called VR&E dollars. These are actually dollars out of the Department of War that are through the GI Bill and are veteran-specific benefits in transitioning out of the U.S. military and into civilian life. If you are building or thinking about building a program targeted at that transition, just know that newly available is that veteran readiness and employment dollars can now include educator apprenticeships and education training programs. They've always included sort of traditional teacher residencies or more traditional educator programs, preparation programs. Now it can include apprenticeships. So that's a sort of like hidden stream of funding that's available to an individual to make that transition. But as we're talking about specialized program development, like special education program development or career and technical education apprenticeships, this is a really interesting way, if you're an IHE or educator preparation program, to think about doing some really particular outreach around this. And there are certain states where there are policy levers in place to speed up veterans joining the educator workforce, Florida in particular. Okay, all the streams. Let's dig in. First, open right now, $85 million in funding to help states and territories fuel registered apprenticeship expansion. All of the slides are going to be available, as are the links. These are dollars that are for registered apprenticeships only. So that's a really important thing to name. You can only use these dollars if you're using a registered apprenticeship program. And really, the explicit directive here is to help people understand how to build this infrastructure through registered apprenticeship navigators, really improve alignment. This comes directly from the talent strategy between registered apprenticeship workforce initiatives and education and CTE systems. You're going to see this focus on pipelines, pipelines, pipelines. So please be paying attention to that. And really thinking about how you could do full stack improvement of systems, improving registration systems, portals and navigation, developing related instruction programs, and really thinking about how states can build this infrastructure. There's formula funding, and then there's innovation dollars available. If you have a state and you partner with a state, or you are a state, or you're a state intermediary who's leading a state initiative, you can both use the formula dollars and work in the proposal to get the formula dollars, but you can also access additional dollars in the innovation space. So because, again, registered teacher apprenticeships are only 3 years old, y'all. I know you can't believe it, but that's a place that you can really plus up those formula dollars. Next slide. Seed grants, open now, $90 million, award range 1 million to 6 million, estimating about 25 to 30 awards. So, they're anticipating some larger programs and some smaller programs. It is all about evidence-based practices that prepare, develop, and enhance the skills of educators. Projects get competitive points when you are thinking about integrating AI literacy, or the seed grants are expanding registered apprenticeships. Two priorities of this administration. So again, I talked about the AI literacy and I talked about America's talent strategy. This is driving competitive preference points. So as you're thinking about applying for these dollars, be thinking about how in your application you can speak to an AI literacy component, or how to think about responsible advancement of AI. That includes literacy, ethics, use, training. So be on the lookout for those words explicitly in your proposal. I want to dive a little bit deeper into the seed because it's open now, and I think this is among the best opportunities for folks. It's due June 1. Pay attention that you need a 25% cost match for the project activities. So it can't, if you're $1 million, you need 250,000. I'm not going to do more complex math than that on this webinar, but be paying attention to that requirement, and they're going to want to see that cost share. Who's eligible? IHEs, national nonprofits, Bureau of Indian Education, but also partnerships now that consist of one of these institutions, a nonprofit or an IHE, and could also include a for-profit entity. So partnerships are now sort of in the mix. And so thinking about the composition, maybe on some larger awards, of an alliance there, of a multi-state or regional partnership, really important to be thinking about those opportunities. Let's go to the next one. Okay. some other sort of how to take advantage of new opportunities coming out from America's Talent Strategy, but also the interagency agreement between the Education Department and the U.S. Department of Labor. This interagency agreement, it's important to say, is being legally challenged, but nonetheless, the administration is pushing ahead and is issuing a couple grants right now under this that are open. First is innovative approaches to literacy. This comes from the Secretary of Education's competitive priority for literacy programs. You might not think like this is a program that we can use in educator preparation, except pieces of the program actually explicitly call out not just for materials, but also for the human capital that strengthens these literacy skills. So if you are thinking about paraprofessionals, if you are thinking about any type of pipeline that is looking at literacy, instructing coaches, that type of thing, check that one out. It might be a fit, it might not. There's a pretty narrow scope there, but we didn't want to leave it off because I think when we think about this grant, it's traditionally been used really about the expansion of materials. Here, we've got expansion of human capital in support of early literacy skills from birth to 12th grade. You do have to be a high need LEA or high need school as defined by the U.S. Department of Education. So jump into that opportunity if that might be a fit. And then I'm going to dive deeper into the teacher and school leader incentive program. So let's go next to this one. So TSL, it's really about improving systems. And so human capital management systems, performance-based compensation systems, data infrastructure. This provide grants, again, to high-need schools and districts who are developing or expanding their human capital management systems. You know, we love data infrastructure at the Pathways Alliance. It's one of our big working groups. We're really working hard to think about the data systems that need to undergird the human work. This year, they need to include performance-based compensation systems that link educator pay to student academic gains and multiple annual evaluations. If this is something your school district, and you have to be a high need school again to be eligible for this, so check that eligibility out, is thinking about or needs dollars for, we really encourage you to look at the TSL program. This can also be used for school leaders. So the underlying purpose is to increase student academic achievement. If you didn't peep the amazing research brief from the Pathways Alliance about the work at Texas Tech that has showed great educator preparation has a massive impact on student outcomes, you should read that brief. But it's really about how do we incentivize effective teaching and leadership in high need schools. LEAs are eligible. Again, that 20% or more students from families below the poverty line. Again, check your eligibility there. Bureau of Indian Education and certain nonprofits. So not all, it's not a blanket for all nonprofits, certain nonprofits. You need to have clear, fair, and multiple evaluations of teacher and leader performance. And it has to be based on student growth. It can have other factors, but student growth outcomes are the dominant measure. You can improve evaluation systems. You can work on ongoing professional development. You can use this money to offer incentives for leadership roles. There are some questions about sustainability. So I know that is often a question that folks struggle with, but be thinking about that. And then also note that if you wanted to use a portion of these funds to study the effectiveness, another big focus of Pathways is how do we build the evidence base for effective educator preparation. If you wanted to use a portion of these funds to look at the effectiveness, fairness, and reliability of compensation and human capital systems, those are eligible activities. So we would love if you would choose to spend a portion of those dollars in studying the interventions and then making that available into the field. So TSL grant, open now. Please be looking at it. Next slide. Great. So I want to talk about something that the next two things are things I need you to have your eyes on strategically. So we're turning the corner now from what's open to what are the things you need to be thinking about strategically as you're thinking about priorities of this administration and what upcoming grant opportunities are going to look like. So I really want folks to be looking at pay per performance incentive payments program. Huh, that's like a tongue twister. So pay per performance incentive payments program. Um, this is an initiative that the Department of Labor has closed, but it was $145 million to expand registered apprenticeships through outcomes-based funding. What does that mean? So instead of providing upfront grants for apprentices, this creates a structure for which in high need areas, there are, if you hit some milestones, certain milestones in hiring, retention, sponsors are actually eligible to get this money for hitting those milestones. So it's not upfront, but you get performance incentives for effective programs. Thinking about this, right now, educator apprenticeships and shortages are not in the list of eligible. There were only a couple fields. There were 5 eligible fields that were eligible for these cooperative agreements. There were 5 of them, 5 fields, 5 cooperative agreements. They did not include educators, but this idea of pay per performance, this idea of outcomes-based incentives are something that we should all be paying attention to. It's a growing trend in federal grants, and I would be thinking about in your programs how to potentially access these funds. As I said, we're not shipbuilders, we're not semiconductor providers or nuclear energy facilities. So right now, not available, but it is a massive trend. You just saw it in the TSL grants. It is going to be a trend in our space. So be ready to respond to this and be thinking about, could I or could a set of intermediaries structure the availability of these additional dollars under cooperative agreement to be able to access them. So really interesting strategic opportunity to keep your eye on. Next strategic opportunity to keep your eye on that will be rolling out in July is workforce Pell Grants. Students will be able to use Pell Grants to enroll in eligible workforce programs. This includes teaching and related instruction programs that you're allowed to use Workforce Pell to fund short-term 8 to 15 week 150 to 599 clock hours, high quality training for high demand, high wage jobs. This includes and is specifically called out early child education professions and teaching assistant credentials. Potentially also tutors would be an eligible group here. Again, 8 to 15 weeks, short-term workforce Pell, 150 to 599. So those registered teacher apprenticeship programs aren't going to qualify for workforce Pell, but these entry points into this pipeline or specific roles like potentially paraprofessional training, potentially early childhood education training, potentially tutors, teaching assistant credentials, those first stair steps into the teaching profession. These are wonderful opportunities to access these dollars. So you must offer a recognized post-secondary credential in a high demand field. It's designed for working adults, so anyone over the age of 18, career changers, and students in non-traditional paths. So again, think of this as I like to think of this as like a potential lever in pre-apprenticeship programs as well. And programs must be offered through an eligible Title IV institution. Again, eligibility here, really, really important. Okay, I tried to save some time here for Q&A. So immediate funding open, SEED, SAFE, TSL, IAL. You have all the details there. Check those out. Strategic alignment and planning. Be thinking about workforce Pell and pay per performance. God, I really stumble over that pay for performance. I'm just going to slow down to say it. And then please do stay connected to us through the Pathways Alliance on LinkedIn, through X or Blue Sky for more of these types of rapid response updates and support. Sabrina, with my 5 minutes left, what questions do we have in the chat?
We only have one for TSL. What's the definition of a teacher and credentialed?
Sorry, say it again for me.
For TSL, what's the definition of a teacher and credentialed?
Yeah, I would refer folks to the solicitation. There are some really specific pieces there around how they're thinking about the educator role, and also what credentials need to result. So I would go directly to the solicitation to grab those. If you have further questions, particularly on TSL, and those immediate funding opportunities, the question period is open. So get those questions in, and the Department of Labor and the U.S. Department of Education will be publishing an ongoing FAQ. So please, I would direct you right to the solicitation.
And the next question for SAFE, does the applicant need to be a government entity?
Right. So look at the criteria. The state does need to be the applicant there, but they can be in partnership with an intermediary. And so this is formula funding plus innovation funding. So they can be working in partnership with an intermediary, but the state is the recipient of the funding via congressional authorization. So nothing's going to change that. But if you are an intermediary who works really closely with the state, I think some of the best SAFE applications we've seen in the past, particularly in the innovation space, particularly around educator apprenticeships, have been when there's a partnership between entities. So those have always scored incredibly high in the past, and I can imagine that they will continue to do so.
Another TSL question. There is a priority for state applications. For districts, should we be working with states, or do large LEAs have an opportunity on their own if aligned to state strategic plans?
Yeah, I think there's always, frankly, in this U.S. Department of Education and U.S. Department of Labor, you should expect the competitive priority to always be for states, given this administration's focus on returning education to the states. I think that large LEAs who can demonstrate alignment would be considered a favorable application as well. And I think there's also recognition, just I would say this broadly, that you know, particularly if you're a larger district, that that's well aligned to state strategic plans, and you could, for example, potentially get a letter of support or other kind of references in your application, that would be looked favorably. States will always have the competitive priority right now.
And there are no more questions.
Awesome. So I'm going to give you guys back 2 whole minutes. And for folks walking the dog or joining us virtually, 28 minutes is the mark. Please stay engaged by joining us on any of our socials, by following the pathwaysalliance.org website. I mean, LinkedIn is where it's at for the Pathways Alliance. I think they have some of the best content in this space. So if you're not following that LinkedIn page, the Pathways Alliance, click that to stay online. And you can always subscribe to the mailing list on the website to stay engaged and informed and receive these updates. Thanks for joining us today. Sabrina, always thanks for hosting. And I know when we talk about money, people always want to hear from us. So we're going to continue to make everybody aware of these opportunities and really encourage you to be investing in diverse educator pathways into the profession. Have a great day.
We hope to cross paths with everyone again. Bye, everybody.